Okay, good morning, Portsmouth. I'd like to call the October 6, 2022 Parking, Traffic, and Safety Committee meeting to order. We could do the attendance.
Mary Lou McElwain.
Here.
Steve Pesci.
Here.
Mark Siracusa.
Here.
Harold Whitehouse.
Here.
Erica Wygonek. Deputy Police Chief Mike Maloney.
Here.
Fire Chief Bill McQuillan.
Here.
Public Works Director Peter Rice.
Here.
City Manager Karen Connard.
She will be joining us into the meeting.
Chairman Andrew Bagley.
Here. Okay, if we could have the financial report. I can
Move
get
to
a,
accept this. Move to
Always
accept
look
this
at me, I
presented.
wonder why.
in a second.
Second.
All right, and I think we have,
Motion been made?
I just made a motion to accept as presented.
Okay, all right.
Mark seconded it, and I think we need a roll call as some members are on Zoom.
Okay. Mary Lou McElwain.
Yes.
Steve Pesci.
Yes.
Mark Siracusa.
Present.
Harold Whitehouse.
Yes.
Erica Wygonek. Deputy Police Chief Mike Maloney.
Yes.
Fire Chief Bill McQuillan.
Yes.
Public Works Director Peter Rice.
Yes.
Chairman Andrew Bagley.
Yes. Okay. And now we're going to move on to public comment. On the agenda for parking, traffic, and safety, we normally limit public comment to 15 minutes. We consistently go over that. But I am going to ask, because I think there might be a lot of comment tonight, for two asks. One, that you try to keep your comments to about 5 minutes. And two, the neighborhood parking program is under old business. So I know some people are here to speak about some of the new business items. So I ask that we let the people that are to speak to the new business items go first. That would include taxi stands. If you want to speak, this would be the appropriate time. Yes, just go up to the microphone and.
Well, I didn't expect to be first. I guess you guys need some taxi stands back, so I wasn't sure. You thought there were 6, and I don't think there's that many. I think we should just keep one on Pleasant Street in front of the Tuscan Steakhouse there, which is close to the Clipper and close to the new Stady, and it's out of the way of other, the buses and the coast and stuff like that in the center of town if they pull up there.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, could you state your name and...
Scott Gerardo, Rockingham Taxi.
Okay, thank you.
I'm the only medallion taxi in Portsmouth.
Yep, thank you very much. It's just for the record so that people understand who's speaking.
And that's it.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Short and sweet.
Yeah, just come up.
Sure. It's a non-agenda item?
That's fine.
Okay. Since it is a non-agenda item, I'll keep it brief. My name is Evan Mullen, resident of 82 Austin Street here in town. I would like to bring some renewed awareness to our neighborhood traffic safety concern on the Summer Street connector between Islington and Middle. Back in the fall of 2019, I submitted an application right around the time that the church was getting ready to demo the school building, and expressed my concern at that time. And of course, we all know what happened after the fall of 2019. So my follow-ups were met with a request to be patient. And so we all know also that our city continued to grow and develop during that period between 2019 and now. And so I see, an increased amount of traffic on that street in our neighborhood, and we also have some families who've come into the neighborhood since that time. And so I will submit another application ahead of next meeting, and I'll include a petition, which I did not include in the first application. So I'll include a petition with outlining some of our concerns and requests and things like that for consideration ahead of next meeting.
Great. Thank you, Evan. Any other speakers? I think we can open it up now for neighborhood parking program speakers. And we should probably let the record show that Erica is now here as well. Come on up.
Good morning. I'm Ken Goldman, 271 Islington Street, and thank you for an opportunity to speak once again on the Islington Creek Neighborhood Parking Program. One of the reasons I bought my home was to supply plentiful and free parking on the adjacent streets, and I hope we can return to that situation. I dispute that the Islington Creek neighborhood has an inherent parking supply versus demand issue. That is the perception of several vocal residents and is based on anecdotal information, most of which predated the Foundry Place parking garage and the employee parking program. The parking department's data has consistently demonstrated that this is not true. This has always seemed to be a solution in search of a problem. The NPP, was supposed to be a 6-month pilot program that lasted more than a year. Pilot programs are tests or feasibility studies and are not intended to be permanent. One option is always to discontinue the program based on the results. The data consistently showed that the program was neither necessary nor effective. I do not understand the reason why there is a proposal to replace it with metered parking. If there is no program, then there is no cost to the city. A request that the program be ended and we go back to the way things were before it was implemented. Reading the handouts, it is not clear if the parking department proposes metered parking for the entire neighborhood or just a part of the neighborhood identified as problematic, i.e. the area between Rock Street and Bridge Street. If the entire neighborhood, I protest strenuously. Metered parking would be inconvenient and expensive for residents, people working at the houses, visitors, and especially overnight visitors. I would like to ask the committee and the city some of the questions I included in my recent letter to the City Council. Does Islington Creek have the most severe parking problem of all neighborhoods in the city of Portsmouth? If not, why are you considering imposing the cost and continued inconvenience of this program on the residents of this neighborhood? Is there any compelling reason at all to have a neighborhood parking program or metered parking in Islington Creek? Why impose the metered parking in Islington Creek rather than in other neighborhoods that have more severe parking problems? And why are you continuing to single us out for a neighborhood parking program and now metered parking, despite the data presented by the parking department showing they are not necessary? My bottom line, we tried a pilot program. The data showed that it was unnecessary and ineffective. And I respectfully request that the neighborhood parking program be ended and the plan to impose metered parking not be implemented over the entire neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Come on up. Oh,
Good morning, Michelle Worth, 439 Hanover Street. This is like the 5th time I've talked about this. You probably know my face. Here we are again. So if you refer to the 2019 survey of the neighborhood, the majority of the neighbors don't want it. I'm not making that up. You have a survey. You took it in 2019. During COVID, there's a handful of well-to-do families who like to park in front of their own house, and they don't like to have to drive down the block to park. And that's all it is. It's not the space in front of your house. There's plenty of parking in our neighborhood. They just want to park in front of their house, and they got together to put together this program. I've been on 439 Hanover Street for 25 years. This is the 2nd time I've been through this whole procedure of the parking program. The data clearly shows from this parking pilot that it doesn't work. It doesn't create a substantial new number of spaces, and I'm sure Mr. Fletcher will present that again. It doesn't have any substantial effect on it, and it's very expensive. So I hear people saying that you want to charge money for permits rather than giving out permits. Well, my neighbors are all in the same situation I am. I have a driveway. It holds 3 cars, but there are 4 drivers in my house. My 2 sons each have a car. I have a car. My husband has a car. He has a sports car that a friend gave him, a 20-year-old sports car, and we have a stinky old van. So we have 6 vehicles we need to park. My sons are going to have to continue to park on State Street like they've been doing for the last year, and I'm going to take my old van and I'm going to park it on State Street. I don't want to pay an extra fee. So what I'm saying is the bunch of neighbors aren't going to buy these permits. So the city is going to pay for this program, because in order to have the neighbors pay for this program, the fee per permit would have to be like $800. Nobody's going to do that. The city is going to end up paying for this. Understand that if you do this program. That being said, our neighborhood is full of apartment buildings. Lots of guys, 3 guys into an apartment and stuff. For a city that makes proclamations about equity and tolerance and inclusion, what this program would do would charge new fees and taxes only on the poorest people in our neighborhood. The wealthy people have driveways. It is only the poorer people that are sharing apartments that will have to pay this fee. So much for tolerance and equity and inclusion. I can't see that the city would want to add a new program that only charged a fee to our poorest neighbors. That's wrong. Here is the solution. At the end of my teaching career, I was an assistant principal at my school in Kingston for a short time. Not a week went by that I didn't have a student or a parent or a teacher come in and explain to me their problem and the new rules and the new programs they wanted me to put in to solve their problem. I understand their problem was very real to them. It was not their job to see the school as a whole. That was my job. Inevitably, the solution was already in a system or program we already had that had been overlooked or hadn't been enforced. And that's exactly what I see here. 20 years ago, when I went through this whole parking problem back then, the solution was to write an ordinance. It is Article 16, Section 7.16, and that declares Hanover Street, the only area that's really congested and has a problem. The rest of the neighborhood, there's nothing. It's only Hanover Street. That would be resident parking only. But it wasn't enforced. It's our situation where we've got, again, programs and laws that just aren't being enforced. And so people run and they have to write a new law. No, you don't. Just enforce what we already have. The existing 7.16, resident parking only on that Hanover Street. Leave the rest of the neighborhood alone, no fees. We already have a system here in Portsmouth that marks your car as a resident. You can have a transfer station sticker. You can have a boat ramp sticker. You can print a new parking sticker, resident sticker, whatever. People can have stickers. If Mr. Fletcher wants to also put parking meters on Hanover Street to make it more flexible for workers and tradesmen and guests to park there as well, that's fine on that street. The rest of the neighborhood is fine. Please don't create a situation where we have equity problems, where you're charging only the poorest people in our city more money than the wealthy people. Let's not do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
I'm Sampo Kasla. I live at 265 Islington. And I read the proposal about the parking program. And right off the bat, it mentions that parking industry best practices, there's no reason to do mitigation measures unless occupancy is 85% or over. And it also states right there in the report that for years, occupancy has not reached 75%. So what reason will we have to deviate from best practices in the parking industry? It really isn't a problem. And a program like this has a tendency to keep on going. You don't have to continue this program. And it's like Ken said back here, it seems to be like a solution in searching for a problem. We don't need it. And definitely, and it also says only 5 spaces were gained, and they were gained further away from the areas of the problem. So it actually had no impact in the problem areas, right? So it's like, it's pointless. It doesn't solve any problem. And I do think that the problem is limited more to Hanover Street. So if that becomes an issue at something that's Portsmouth residents only, that's fine. But to enforce this kind of metered parking or through the app on the residents when there's no need, it doesn't make any sense and deviates from best practices. So I can't conceive of any possible reason why that makes sense if you want to improve the parking. So that's it.
Great, thank you.
Go ahead, please. No, go ahead. Hi, I'm Barbara Sadik, and I live at 271 Islington. I spoke, close to a year ago, more than a year ago, when we were deciding whether or not to implement this pilot program. My background is in urban planning. I have a master's degree in urban planning from Johns Hopkins, and I happen to have worked on one of the first neighborhood parking programs in the country in Baltimore City. That parking program was needed. We had well in excess of 95% occupancy in a neighborhood, and it was being parked in by people who happened to work for the state of Maryland. I spoke a year and a half ago saying, why are we not following the data? We have a parking rate of under 80%. Nobody needs a parking program under 80%. But I was told by some members of the community who were really into this, oh, it's just a pilot. We should try it out. I was quiet and I said, okay, you know, if the city wants to spend money trying something out that isn't needed, go for it. But now we've found that it isn't needed, it costs a lot of money, and we're putting a burden on neighbors who didn't want this in the first place. Yes, there was a parking survey done of the neighborhood, and it was done before the employee program at the Foundry. And it didn't meet the criteria asked of this survey, and the survey never, ever said, are you willing to spend $125 per car to have a parking program? Nobody ever responded to that. Instead, we have this, as everybody keeps saying, a solution looking for a problem. And I strongly recommend and urge this committee to say, okay, we did the pilot. We found that the pilot did not have any meaningful effect. Let's get rid of it and go back to our status quo ante. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Right that way, and I think I can do this right. Hope I didn't give you my copy. Good morning, Elizabeth Bratter, property owner, 159 McDonough Street, 342 Cabot Street. Please take a minute, well, when you get them. I colored on this. I did this all at 7 o'clock this morning, so there's no guarantee in accuracy. So I just want you to take a minute to look at them. They're showing that the NPP program is going to be 113,500. Wait, I need something. Which page are we looking at? Sorry.
That's what happens when your day is running crazy. So that would be about 1.8% of the entire budget for the parking division, or 3.04% of the operations costs of the parking division. So I find that number seems to be a bit high considering what parking division spends. But that's just budget stuff. So most of Islington Street is supposed to be monitored anyway. It has 2-hour parking or 15-minute parking. That's supposed to be monitored on a regular basis. To swing down through the NPP zone would probably add about 30 minutes since they do that in a car. The printed out budget shows you that if you flip it, the dental expense for the general government is $141,393. The natural gas is budgeted for 2022 for $132,500. The gasoline is $150,000. I'm thinking maybe I printed out the wrong report. But it's not to debate the cost of the program. It's just to point out that there is a cost, but not necessarily as high as it's being presented. The most important thing to remember is that there were actually goals to the program. Every program that you design, every pilot program, everything that you run in a city has goals. So the 3 goals that I remember was to provide parking relief, especially for the bookends of Islington Creek, but the whole neighborhood as itself. To not cause rollover into other neighborhoods or within the Islington Creek neighborhood, and to encourage the use of the Foundry Garage instead of the neighborhood. All of those goals were achieved by this program. The reduced parking program, which was offered when the NPP was first announced, before it was even put into place, Mr. Fletcher started that program right up, and he got a lot of people signed up for that program. There was actually a real increase in participation because the cost was made much more reasonable. After the NPP started, only a few people joined that Foundry Garage program because perhaps they didn't read the paper and didn't know NPP was coming, and then they got a ticket. There was no increase in the use of the Goodwin Park neighborhood because they are already full. There is no parking over there except for at nighttime. So Islington Creek, people who parked in Islington Creek and were using it as a parking lot had to review their options, either stay for 2 hours or park somewhere else for a longer period of times. There was definitely more availability for neighbors to park closer to their homes or sometimes next to them. It is true that the lower part of Hanover Street may have experienced the same amount of cars parking on the street, but as far as I can tell by what I've read, no one, not a single person, went down on all of these streets and checked whether the people using the parking now had a sticker or they were other people. Nor did they compare business use versus residential use. Those were brought up at the beginning, that the suggestion made was having different color passes so people could actually track who is now using this neighborhood once the cars moved out into the garage. Those are all important questions as far as I'm concerned, because if more people who live on Hanover Street are able to park on Hanover Street, and more people who live on McDonough Street are now able to park on McDonough Street, there may be the same amount of cars. There may only be 5 more spaces, but it's the people who live there who may be parking there now. I know on the corner of Cabot and McDonough Street on that end, we have Safeway storage down there. They have 2 parking lots they don't use. By limiting the businesses to 3 passes, it allowed for all those businesses down there to park down there. There was one down there that used to have 25 vehicles. You limited them to 3, they had to find someplace else to put those other 22 cars. During the day, people go to work, and the businesses who have business passes come down there and park. The difference is they don't take up all the spaces. They are now evenly divided. So you can park down there during the day. There's 1 or 2 spaces down there that you can share. The people who are going to the businesses can get into the businesses. The people who are going home can stay there, and the people who ran to the grocery store come back and get there. I'm down there almost every day, 2 or 3 times a day, and I don't have a pass, but I'm able to park. Sometimes I have to park way down by Dover Street, but on most days I can park closer to my buildings. To me, this is a sign of successful program because it is now a true shared parking program. That's what we try to do in Portsmouth. We want to have shared parking. We want to have residents using the parking when they need it and businesses using it when they are not there. That's how it should work. The negatives to the program are very inconvenient. It has started neighbors and many businesses to think about parking in general, which is something we need to talk about in Portsmouth, is parking. If you have more than one contract, so the other inconvenience to having to get the permits is that if you have more than one contractor, you have to go to the Foundry Garage. If you have more than one guest who's going to stay for more than 2 hours, or is going to come, or wants to come before 6:15 or after 9:45 a.m., they're going to have to get a pass. All the time you have to make a trip to the Foundry Garage. I've been down there a lot. They're starting to get tired of seeing me. Everyone in this city wants to park for free. Sadly, the poor management of parking by the City of Portsmouth many boards has left neighborhoods close to downtown impacted greatly by this mess. Due to the mess, the parking should be free for all residents in the NPP zone. There is currently a business that is starting its way through the boards, and the first thing they've proposed is adding an addition on the back, which will get rid of all of their parking for their employees. They don't care. Why should they care? Because they're going to park in the neighborhood. Some businesses have complained about parking because they're only allowed 3 permits. And they have no place for their employees to park, but that's what the Foundry Garage is for. Please continue the NPP, but please remove all the negatives by allowing all registered vehicles to a home to have NPP parking permits for free. Please consider a minimal charge for business similar to the employee parking fee at the Foundry Garage and limit the amount of spaces they can have. Please do charge for contractors. I thought I would have to pay for contractors when I went down there the last few weeks, but I didn't because the parking program is free right now. But I would have been willing to pay as much as $5 a day for each contractor. The first thing I said to my contractors is, I want you to carpool because I have to get a permit for every one of your cars. And anybody who doesn't want to get into that list can go get a ticket, because that's how I look at it. If you're not willing to carpool, and construction takes up a lot of time. If you have your siding done, you have 5 cars that come down into the neighborhood. That's a lot of spaces. So I would encourage you to charge for contractors. This encourages carpooling and it encourages them to bring less vehicles into. In regards to Park Mobile, I think that would be an invisible program. It would be signs and that's it. I would caution you to charge more for it because you don't want to encourage people to park in the neighborhood. I would be cautious about whether you allow more than 2-3 hours because you want to prevent what happened before, and that's creating the Islington Creek parking lot. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Do we have anybody on Zoom?
Oh, yes, we do. Liza Hewitt.
Go ahead.
For me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. My name is Liza Hewitt, and I own property next to Liz's at 167, 169 McDonough Street. You know, I have real mixed feelings about this. I can certainly understand the folks down in that Hanover Street area being concerned about parking. It's been like that forever, and I sympathize with them. I'm faced with a situation where I own a duplex. I typically have 4 cars because they're 2-bedroom duplexes connected to each of those apartments. There are 4 cars altogether. We have no off-street parking. None, zippo. It's not that we don't choose to park off-street, we just don't have any option for off-street parking. So, you know, my husband and I try extremely hard to keep the cost down for our tenants. We understand the high cost of living in Portsmouth, and we've always come in way below where we should. But this is going to force us to raise the rents because I've got to cover these costs somehow. And I think what that woman said before is true, that, you know, it's not, you know, people have chosen to get a parking permit even though they have a driveway just because they can for free. I think that's probably inflated the numbers and probably, the data on where you're placing the $125 permit proposal. I'm concerned about what's going to happen when you realize that people aren't willing to pay, and the cost is going to skyrocket for those of us that have to require our tenants and have to require residents to park on the street and get a parking permit because there is no choice. I would like, if you're going to go ahead with this, I do have the same kinds of concerns that Liz does about that warehouse and the amount of parking that's generated, the need for the fact that the owner does have parking area on site that he was previously charging his residents for, so of course they're going to park on the street because it's free. Maybe reaching out to him and seeing if he will open up his parking lots for his businesses would be helpful. And then another couple of things. Is there any possibility that if you do go forth with this, you could narrow the hours to maybe being 8 to 5, so that people, the residents who come home there in the evening, most of the business people will have moved on out, and they won't have to charge for instance, their visitors if they're coming, after work hours to visit. 8 to 5 would make more sense. Another thing, which is a pretty small thing, but if you're going to go forth with it, I just want to make sure I put it out there. Will this parking permit include the cost for residents to park down in the garage during snow removal? Because I think it would be pretty lousy for you to charge them $125 for a parking pass and then double hit them when they have to take the cars off the street and pay more money to park down in the garage while the snow removal is occurring. I think you need to consider that and put that in if you are going to continue with it. So good luck in your decision. As I said, I'm kind of torn one way or the other, but I think there are some further things that you need to think about, and also the fact that nobody's come up and spoken for it here at this meeting might say something. Thank you.
Thank you, Liza. Do we have any other Zoom callers? That's all. All right, I'm going to close the public comment, and we're going to move on to new business. A, taxi stands, request for a report back on the removal of taxi-only parking spots downtown and across the city by City Council. Sample motion, move to request a report back from staff on impacts of removing taxi stands citywide.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yes, second right here.
Oh, yeah, any discussion, Harold? Or if there's...
Do you want to talk about the taxi stand?
Yeah. What?
Do you want to talk about the taxi stand?
No. Yes, I just would like to mention about the taxis. Can I mention about the taxis?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Years ago, there was one location for taxi stands, and it included a lot of employees at the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard and downtown, at the certain businesses downtown. And it was located right on the corner of Fleet Street and Congress. And there was areas with about 8 or 10 taxis. I was wondering if that has been considered. One location. It was right on the corner of Fleet Street and Congress.
So in the city of Portsmouth, we have a taxi medallion program.
Yeah.
We have exactly one medallion, and that was the gentleman who spoke earlier today. And I might propose, normally we do a report back, but speaking with the gentleman and his comments in public comment, he would prefer if we got rid of the taxi stands that we retain the one in front of Tuscan Market. Since there's only one taxi, it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to have more than one taxi stand, because you can't be in more than one place at a time. And since his preference is for the taxi stand in front of, Tuscan Steakhouse, we could make a motion to...
I'll move to withdraw my initial motion. If the second is still in. Yeah.
So if somebody wanted to make a motion to...
I'll move to withdraw my initial motion.
To eliminate the taxi stands with the exception of the one in front of Tuscan Steakhouse?
Yeah.
Peter, you want to?
Okay. Well, no, I don't want to make that motion. No. I'll move to make that motion.
Second. Second.
Discussion. Any discussion?
So this is on a trial period, right?
Well, it would have to be approved by the city council.
I see, yeah.
But the situation we're in is we only have one authorized user of taxi stands.
Okay.
So, if the situation changes in a few years and we have lots of taxis again, we could always revisit it. But at the current situation, we're losing parking inventory downtown that can't be used because there's nobody eligible to use it. So I think this motion makes a lot of sense, and if we need to revisit it in the future, we certainly could do that. Steve?
I support the motion. One concern I have is if we remove all the spaces for the taxis, and I realize the whole mobility market's changed, we're finding increasingly that I think vehicles are pulling over into the bus pullouts, and then the buses are not able to access that, so it's backing up into traffic. So I support the motion. I think we just monitor it and see how things go with the new system.
I think we can monitor that, see if there's any unintended consequences once we implement this.
I mean, we can. It's difficult to monitor all the spaces at once. But, we could select some areas to monitor.
Okay. All right. I guess, Mary Lou, do you have any comments? I can't see your.
I'm having a difficulty with the audio. I'm using my iPad, and there's a lot of echo. So I'm trying to get the gist of everything you're saying. I don't have any comment on the taxi stand except to say we don't see any taxis around Portsmouth.
Okay. I guess with that, we could take a roll call vote.
Okay. Mary Lou McElwain,
Yes.
Steve Pesci,
Yes.
Mark Siracusa,
Yes.
Harold Whitehouse,
Yes.
Erica Wygonek. Do I vote today?
Yes.
Deputy Police Chief Mike Maloney,
Yes.
Fire Chief Bill McQuillan,
Yes.
Public Works Director Peter Rice,
Yes.
Chairman Andrew Bagley.
Yes. Okay. Moving on. Morning Street, request to restrict parking at Woodbury Avenue intersection by resident. A sample motion would be moved to install no parking here till corner signs 30 feet from Woodbury Avenue.
Mr. Chairman, this request came to us from a resident of Woodbury Avenue who, when they use Morning Street to access their home in this one-way section of Woodbury Ave, and there's been vehicles parked on Morning Street that makes it difficult for vehicles to get in and out of Morning Street, makes it a one-lane road. So they've requested that we put up signs that would be in compliance with state law and city ordinances that prohibits parking within 30 feet of the intersection. So I passed out flyers to the residents who abut this section of Morning Street so that they're aware of this possible restriction.
Okay. If I could get somebody to make that motion.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I move to install a no parking here to corner on the 30 feet from the Woodbury Avenue area.
And a second. Okay. And any discussion? I think this one's pretty straightforward. If we could get a roll call vote, please.
Mary Lou McElwain,
Yes.
Steve Pesci,
Yes.
Mark Siracusa,
Yes.
Harold Whitehouse,
Yes.
Erica Wygonek,
Yes.
Deputy Police Chief Mike Maloney,
Yes.
Fire Chief Bill McQuillan,
Yes.
Public Works Director Peter Rice,
Yes.
Chairman Andrew Bagley.
Yes.
Should I include Karen?
I think for the next one.
I missed the discussion. Thank you.
And I guess we should let the record show that City Manager Karen Kennard is here now as well. Item C, Marriott Drive, request for speed study by resident. And the sample motion is moved to refer to staff for study and a report back.
Motion to move to refer to staff for study and report back.
I'll second that motion.
All right. Any discussion?
This request came to us from a neighborhood meeting we had on the sidewalk project in Maple Haven. So we're following up on some requests from that committee, from that meeting.
Okay. Roll call vote on that, please.
Mary Lou McElwain,
Yes.
Steve Pesci,
Yes.
Mark Siracusa,
Yes.
Harold Whitehouse,
Yes.
Erica Wygonek,
I don't think I vote now.
I think the city manager's here
Oh,
now,
I'm
so-
sorry, okay. Deputy Police Chief Mike Maloney,
Yes.
Fire Chief Bill McQuillan,
Yes.
Public Works Director Peter Rice,
Yes.
City Manager Karen Connard,
Yes.
Chairman Andrew Bagley.
Yes. And item D, Maple Haven, request for stop sign evaluations at several locations by resident. And the sample motion is move to refer to staff for study and report back.
You want a second?
Or you want to make the motion and then we'll get a...
Okay.
Make a motion.
I'll make the motion.
Okay, well,
Mark seconded it.
Move to refer to staff for study and report back. That's the
Second.
motion, second. And that's the same thing,
Okay.
Eric,
Yes.
from the meeting? That came from the meeting back in September.
Wasn't there a study on the one side of Maple Haven already?
The north and south?
Yes, and this was a request for some stop signs, so this is a separate study that we're going to do. Take a look and see if stop signs are needed. A few of those intersections on Suzanne Drive are confusing as to who has the right of way there.
The city gave a presentation of what they're going to do for informational purposes, and this is just follow-up requests from the residents. Is that correct, Eric?
Yes, yep.
all right, if there's no further discussion, I'll ask for a roll call vote, please.
Mary Lou McElwain,
Yes.
Steve Pesci.
Yes.
Mark Siracusa.
Yes.
Harold Whitehouse.
Yes.
Deputy Police Chief Mike Maloney.
Yes.
Fire Chief Bill McQuillan.
Yes.
Public Works Director Peter Rice.
Yes.
City Manager Karen Connard.
Yes.
Chairman Andrew Bagley.
Yes. Okay, moving on to old business. Item A, Neighborhood Parking Program, discussion and recommendation of the program fee to fee committee. I have Parking Director Ben Fletcher here to explain what's in the packet.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for the opportunity to come and speak this morning. As you've all seen in the packet is some information. At the council meeting on August 22nd, the Parking Division was tasked with developing a pricing strategy to assure that if the program continued forward, any permanent program would remain cost neutral. So parts of this neighborhood do have a supply and demand issue. Rock Street to Bridge Street, adjacent to the Foundry Garage, is indeed overutilized due to large rental property populations and a short supply of on-street and private inventory. But the overall neighborhood, as bounded in the current NPP map, is not experiencing occupancy figures to a degree that would normally dictate demand reduction resolutions. The division performed an analysis of the 21 and 22 spring and summer seasons using occupancy percentages from May to early August. The study indicated that the neighborhood did enjoy a 1.98% reduction in demand that can be directly attributed to the pilot effort, equating to 4.96 spaces additional that were open neighborhood-wide. This does indicate a positive result. The spaces gained, though, however, were not within the geographical area most affected by high demand and short supply between Rock and Bridge. Rather, the newly achieved open spaces were primarily realized in the less populated, lower demand areas west of Cornwall. So policy recommendations coming from the Parking Division are always related to behavior management. For example, the city has a stated goal of turning spaces over every 3 hours in the central business district. Therefore, pricing in the downtown inventory accelerates after the third hour, providing an economic incentive for users to choose to vacate or turn the space over at the city's desired third-hour goal. This leaves inventory open for the next user group, enabling support of local businesses by providing convenient parking options for users. Unlike the city's high-demand commercial inventory, there would not be any call to encourage users to turn spaces over at the third hour in a residential neighborhood, so the Parking Division would not recommend pricing mirroring the stay and pay model that we have in the downtown space. A flat hourly rate structure resembling what is utilized in each of the city's garages would make more sense for this application. So to encourage continued use of the Foundry Garage, a price point of $1.50 per hour would be recommended. This coincides with the current B-zone rate of $1.50 for the first 3 hours, but would not escalate in the 4th hour and beyond. Pricing in this manner provides a natural incentive for visitors to the neighborhood to choose the Foundry Garage with its $1 per hour price point, while employees of downtown Portsmouth businesses already take advantage of the downtown employee parking program, which provides for 10-hour parking sessions at $3 apiece or 30 cents per hour at the Foundry Garage. The application of metering technology for all non-NPP credentialed users allows for simplification. You would no longer need guest passes, you wouldn't need event passes, and contractor passes would not be necessary. All of these would be eliminated due to the fact that non-credentialed users would simply engage the meter system for the duration of their stay. The anticipated revenue from on-street visitor parking could be expected to offset a good portion of the costs associated with extending this program. So a flat fee for passes could be applied. For year one, the division is recommending $125 per pass annually for up to 3 passes per household, each of which would need to be associated with a specific vehicle as in the program now. The $125 annual credential fee would help offset administrative costs, labor and materials for processing applications and maintaining the city's NPP database, while fees collected through the metering system would help offset the cost of enforcement. And at the conclusion of year one, revenues could be assessed against ongoing costs, and the annual permit fees could be adjusted at that time. So finally, rather than install kiosks or individual meters for each space, the division would recommend, if we move to meter the area, that we do it through the use of the Park Mobile app. There would be minimal additional signage necessary, if any. There wouldn't be any crowding of sidewalks with meters or kiosks. It's paperless, and the app already provides some popular features such as text notifications when you're running short of time, the ability to extend your session if you desire, and the resident discount would already apply for residents of Portsmouth that don't live in the neighborhood, where they wouldn't be paying the 35-cent fee, and they'd have a 50-cent reduction in their costs. So again, the division was tasked with understanding, or trying to help us understand how to offset these costs if we were to continue the program. So the discussion really should be whether or not to continue it at all, and then how to best go about mitigating those costs.
Thank you, Director Fletcher. Is there any questions for Ben?
One question.
Yes.
Maybe I address the city manager. The fee committee only meets when it's necessary to meet. It doesn't have a standard monthly meeting.
It does not meet monthly. It definitely meets in advance of setting budget parameters. But Peter,
if I may clarify too, on-street fees are ordinance-driven. They're not fee committee-driven.
Oh, it isn't? Okay.
So their parking lots and garages are fee committee. On-street parking is an ordinance-driven. That's per state.
So will this issue go to the fee committee?
It could go to the fee committee, but it's ultimately the council's decision related to it. It's an ordinance-driven. It's not a. Right. It's not a fee committee per se.
Okay, thank you.
I've got 2 questions, Director Fletcher. Enforcement only happens during the hours of 9 in the morning till 8 p.m.
Correct.
So if somebody was to spend the night in the neighborhood that wasn't part of that neighborhood, they wouldn't have to pay after the hours of 8.
Just as if they parked in any street downtown.
Okay. And then the other question that came up in public comment was different enforcement hours of, for instance, say 8 to 5. Is that feasible in your opinion, or do you think the parking department?
I mean, that would actually shorten the amount of time we're spending out there. So.
But it would start an hour earlier than.
Oh well, yeah. I'm sorry, I wasn't paying close enough attention to that. But yeah, I mean, we're not staffed at that hour, so we would have to change our staffing to accommodate that one group. Yeah.
Okay. Erica.
I mean, I think 9 to 5 would probably be as effective as 8 to 5 in terms of. Yeah. It sounded like the neighbors' concern was that they want those people, the people who've come in during the day, to leave by the time they get home from work. Was my impression of the comments. So the neighborhood passes would only be available for residents now? Businesses wouldn't have an option because they would just use the meters? Is that the idea?
I would suggest that that the businesses would have the same 3 that they have now.
Okay.
But limited to that.
So this says 3 per household, but it's 3 per household or business?
Correct, yeah.
And the residents would have 50 cents off the per hour rate, so it would only be $1 for them to park on the street.
The app is already programmed that way, yes.
Okay. I'm also curious about why is it that we don't want to enforce the 3-hour, like why don't we want to nudge people to leave after 3 hours in this location?
Well, the primary reason we do that in downtown is to turn the space over so that the businesses can enjoy a continual influx of open space nearby. It's just a different dynamic. I mean, residential people, when you're visiting a residence, the object is not necessarily to move people along. It's, why are you there? You're watching a football game or you're visiting your Nana or what have you. It's a totally different situation.
But it could be all-day parking for business then?
If they paid the meter all day, for sure. But again, at $1.50 an hour, they would be far more advantaged to go to the Foundry Garage at $1 an hour.
Right. And the reason that we would do it in the whole neighborhood and not just the area that you've mentioned as being the overutilized area is out of concern that it's going to just push people to park the next block over where they don't have to pay?
So, in a nutshell, yeah. So originally the mapping was much smaller, and then it was expanded as in 2019, 2018, when we had these discussions initially, that people were worried about spilling over into the next street over, and then they would want it, and then they would go to the next street over. That's how the original map was drawn up, or how it became to be the way it is. Islington gave a natural border of 2-hour management anyway, and Bridge Street, same thing, and that's monetized, and then the railroad tracks to the north, and it was just basically how far west we wanted to go with it, and it turned out that the neighborhood decided at the time that all the way to Dover was appropriate.
Would it be possible for us to constrain the geography back to that area now, or are we kind of, is this a binary, either we do the neighborhood parking or we don't do it at all? I guess I'm not really clear what our decision is. Like, what are we being asked to comment on here today?
So let me give my perspective on it. I received quite a few emails and phone calls and texts. I would say both in support for it and indifferent. I would say more people were against it, but it's a relatively small sample size. The goals of the pilot program, I believe originally it was the South End in this neighborhood, but the South End elected not to be part of it. And then, it was a pilot program. It was a study. It was let's gather some data and see where the data leads us. The council asked for Director Fletcher to come up with a pricing scheme where it would be relatively revenue neutral. And so, through crunching the numbers, we figured this, it might be able to pay for itself, so to speak. That we won't know till we actually implement it. If we do implement something, we might be over, might be under, might be right on the mark. So hearing the feedback of the program, looking at the data, ultimately it's going to be a council decision. But we are in a position where if we wanted to, we could make a recommendation. And one recommendation I might throw out there for the committee to consider is that we now have a pricing structure that we can go to the neighborhoods of the city and say, this is, if you want a neighborhood parking program, this is what it's going to look like, this is what it's going to cost. Are you interested or not? Now, in our city ordinances, we have a policy where if you can get, I believe, 75% of the residents of single-family homes to sign up if they want to be part of the program, we would implement the program. So what we could do is we now have a structure for a program. We could end the pilot and now leave it up to the residents in the neighborhoods if they want to have a neighborhood parking program in their area. And if 2 streets come forward and say that they want it, and 75% of the people that live on those streets want it, then we could recommend that we implement it. And if nobody comes forward, we don't have one. If every neighborhood in the city comes forward, then we have them throughout the city. But this is taking the data that we collected and then giving it to the residents to decide if they want a program such as this. Because what I'm hearing is there's no clear consensus. Some people think it's the greatest thing ever, and other people think it's horrible, and many people just don't seem to have any opinion one way or the other. But I think once we start charging money, that may change. So on the agenda, we're going to recommend to the fee committee that they consider this program, and we could send it with a recommendation that the program, we've got enough data, we can end the pilot, and the fee committee can set the fees, and then it can go to council, and council can say, okay, if you want a neighborhood parking program, this is what you, the residents, need to do to go about getting one.
Chair?
Yes.
So the agenda is discussion recommendation of a program fee to the fee committee. So do you want to, as a group, do we have to decide to move forward with that or do something different?
Well, Director Rice, could you clarify, should we send this to the fee committee? Is that a mistake or is that correct?
Well, it's really it'd be a referral as a informational to the fee committee, because technically street parking fees don't go, they're not a fee, they're a parking, it's in the state law, it's regulated by ordinance. So it's not necessarily a fee that you can just put in and then it gets adopted by a budget and then gets published. You have to have it in the ordinance to be able to charge it on the street.
I mean, I guess,
There's no reason you can't send it to the fee committee. And I think the thought was, given the interest of the fee committee relative to revenues, that it would be appropriate, at least for informational purposes, to refer it to the fee committee. That was the intent.
Okay. With that being said, do you still feel like that's the right, to put you on the spot, or do you think we should just go directly to the council?
Not being an elected official, I would defer to however, you would use the chair and as an elected official would like to go. I don't see necessarily the need to go to the fee committee, but given, a feeling of prerogative, it might be an appropriate one-step approach. It'll give people a little bit more time to digest the program. But at the same time, if a decision needs to be made, it's truly a policy decision. The city staff will implement whatever the council ends up deciding. I think today's discussion is more, do we feel that the approach in terms of the structure of these fees and how we go about doing it is appropriate? Do we need to tweak it? I personally think it's a well thought out approach. I think simplifying it by making the parking on street having a parking rate that you pay if you're going to be there. You don't have to go get passes. Makes it a lot easier on the residents, as well as the operation of the program. So if the decision is to go ahead with the program, I think this approach is appropriate. But that is whether you move forward or not is really a policy decision by council.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I
yes.
can weigh in, in my brief history here, it is not typical for the fee committee to take up matters for which they do not have jurisdiction and a vote, right? They're not typically used in an advisory or an informative
Be a recommendation
capacity.
to council.
It could serve in that, to take that recommendation role, but so could the Parking and Traffic Safety Committee.
Okay. Erica?
I just want to restate what I think I heard we're doing or could do to make sure that I understand it and to get clarification. So I think our goal today is to discuss what a neighborhood parking program could look like in terms of the structure of it, what we're recommending the structure of a neighborhood parking program would look like, not to decide if there should be a neighborhood parking program.
Yeah, and
those are two different things. One is if there was a neighborhood parking program, how would it be implemented? And one is should there, and if so, where? And we do not need to take up the if so, where. We're just focused on the what should a structure of a neighborhood parking program look like. Is that correct?
I think that's correct. So the pilot program's gone on for a considerable amount of time, and it hasn't always been clear, because we've voted to continue the pilot program so we could get more data. I think at some point, it's ultimately a council decision. So what we should do as a board, because we've heard from all the speakers and, more comments than maybe most people on the council have, is say, okay, this is what we've heard, this is what the data says, this is what we're suggesting. If you want to implement a neighborhood parking program, these might be the parameters. To Peter's point, what we could do is say, these are the numbers that, and if we wanted to, we could change the numbers, the 125 or whatever, through discussion, but I think they're good numbers. But we could also recommend to the council, if you're not comfortable with this aspect, maybe reference the fee committee. But I think sending it to the council sooner rather than later makes sense, because ultimately this is really a political decision. It's, we're not talking about, fires or schools or police here, things that we absolutely have to have. This would go under things that we might desire to have, and things that we don't have to have, things that are desires, are typically, political decisions. So I think we should try and craft something today that is clear and concise as it can be, and present it to the council, and then let the council decide what they want to do with that data. Steve, and then Mark.
Counselor, I think you laid out a good summary of the history of this, and I want to acknowledge that the parking staff has spent a lot of time over the past year plus on this, trying to develop a system to test, see what benefits were, see what the costs were. I think, Ben, you've done a great job laying that out. I view it as a good experiment. I do think it's up to the council to decide whether the net benefits are there for the community. But I agree with Erica's assessment that we now have a framework laid out. Maybe the pilot needs to end. The new framework is there as an option if the council wants to lay that on the table for neighborhoods to choose to opt in under a new system. So I think in the end, this pilot has worked. I'm sensitive to a lot of the speakers that have said it's not necessary, et cetera. Well, that's a decision to be made, but I do think we have a framework laid on the table that seems rational and logical. We know what some of the costs are. I think that the council should review it and consider it, but the pilot probably should, the free pilot that we've been under should probably come to an end.
Mark?
Just going back to the old business, discussion recommendation of a program fee to the fee committee. I'm going to motion to table that language, or can I motion to table that language and we move on to some other motion?
I don't know that
we haven't
the first motion.
Or we're just having discussion?
Yeah, I guess we're just having discussion. So what I would suggest is that maybe we recommend something to council. And along those lines, I think it's probably time for, it's up to the council, but I think, the pilot program's gone on for quite some time now. There's probably not great benefit in continuing the pilot. So we would recommend we end the pilot. We would recommend that we set the parameters as the parking department has suggested, which the council can change if they wishes to. And that if a neighborhood wants a parking program, everything kind of starts fresh. So there may not be a parking program in Islington Creek, or there may be a parking program in half of Islington Creek, or there may not be one in that area of the city, but Panaway Manor decides that they want a parking program and they can have one.
So, Chair, what's the best language for us at this moment to make a motion?
I would suggest
asking staff and manager, Peter. It's a general question to staff and the chair as committee members. How would you proceed with a motion at this time? Because we're discussing, but it seems like, does anybody want to step forward? And I can't formulate a motion in my head.
I feel
wish I had his background with a little bit of
probably
public.
suggest it.
I like the framework of what you've just laid out. That the the pilot program should be sunset, that we present to the council a framework for a new optional neighborhood parking program with costs, and develop a method for a neighborhood to opt into that should they wish to. Just like 3 points to that. I guess that's how I kind of would view it.
So,
If we get a
Mr. Chair, if I could just speak to this point. I mean, it's this a la carte approach to neighborhood by neighborhood throughout the city is going to be problematic when it comes to costing out and manning the enforcement. You know, if Maple Haven decides they want a parking program, that would entail our staff having to be down there on a regular basis. Not that they aren't deserving, and not that we wouldn't adjust to do that, but it's just that it's not a one-size-fits-all. It would be an escalating impact on costs associated with the operations. So it's we've made this committee has acknowledged the political aspects of this program in the past. If you look at the data does not support the program. There are aspects that benefit certain residents that we understand this, you know, it's an improved quality of life, and that is why it is a political decision, not a purely technical decision. I would not recommend opening it up to the entire city. I would focus it on you know, areas that are known to be challenging, which really are the denser urban portions of the city. And you know, whether you could look at the downtown business district as kind of the starting point, and don't expand it beyond that at this point. You know, it in and of itself is almost a pilot as well, where we've come up with a framework. We showed it can work in terms of operations. However, it's expensive, and the benefit isn't necessarily there. That's at least in terms of the aggregate. In terms of the individual, there are benefits to the individual, and I'm not saying that's not the case. However, you know, we, as somebody mentioned, we have to think about the whole of the city, and we have to think about the precedent we're setting, and we have to think about, you know, what are we saying, you know, to any resident that gets together with 5 folks on one block. Okay, that one block is now, you know, private parking, and you know, it becomes a very challenging thing. You know, it's one section of Lincoln Avenue. You know, it's now
That's a great point.
So I think we need to really focus on a more defined program, and the unfortunate policy decision associated with it is one of, you know, how do you make a decision without upsetting a certain portion of the, you know, residents, and the other portion, as well as the other portion. So it's a very difficult challenge.
No matter, Mayor?
Yes.
Yeah, no matter what motion is made, I won't approve or anything unless it's referred to the city council in reference to the pilot program. They've referred a lot of issues to us.
Yes.
Now I'm referring it back to the council.
I think your point is
Is that a motion?
well taken.
That's a motion.
Yeah.
That's part of it.
Mark?
Can someone at this table articulate a motion to move forward?
I like Steve's, I like Harold's addition, and then to Director Rice's point, you know, as a politician, I don't like to carve out sections of the city.
Yeah.
What might be a good solution is that we have a minimum number of households.
Yep.
So your neighborhood, 200 households, I don't, you know, maybe somebody should come up with that number. But if we, you know, if the neighborhood contains at least, or parking spaces, if the neighborhood has at least 100 parking spaces, the program can more or less financially support itself. And if, you know, if Maple Haven, which I don't anticipate that they would, but if for some reason in the future they decided they needed a neighborhood parking program because, you know, the situation changed out there, if the program is truly cost neutral, it wouldn't incur, you know, the person regulating the parking out there would be out there every day in that particular area. Is that correct, or is that not a?
So, Mr. Chairman, if I could, so we we've shown a kind of a path forward. If a neighborhood's interested, they petition the city council to do a pilot, which then validates the desire validates the request that yes, it's needed, and it showed a benefit. It identifies the costs associated with operating it. So I think that would be the mechanism to initiate this. Instead of saying any group that gets together can get a program, any group that gets together can initiate a pilot effort, which would then validate the request, and then, so it would have to repeat what was done in the Islington area, or the McDonough area, and then it needs to go to council for, so we've looked at that, we've done the pilot effort in the area, we've got the data, we've shown that there's some benefit, but it's not necessarily, doesn't meet the industry standard, and now it's a policy decision that has to come back to council. So it's similar to the traffic calming approach, where just because a group of people come in and say they want a traffic calming measure, first they have to show that there's support, then there's data collected, then there's it's reported to us, and we review it, and then if it's supported with the data, supported by the residents, it can move forward. So I would say that we create that kind of mechanism, that it's not just a blanket, everybody can get their own parking however they want it. It has to be a formulaic approach where this is how you move forward, and then the final decision, for the parking, traffic, and safety stuff is ours. And in this case, it goes to council for a recommendation. And so that's.
I'm going to go on a limb.
Said that.
So Erica and then Mark.
Did you say that?
I had a couple of, I guess, comments and questions to various things that have come up. One point of concern I had was there was a mention that the current ordinance is 75% of owners of single-family homes are. Is that the case?
I don't believe that's an ordinance.
Or
it's just a policy.
Okay, it seems. I don't understand why single-family homes would have precedence over residents in other housing types. And I feel like especially the places that we're having the most capacity issues are places that aren't necessarily dominated by single-family homes. By definition, there's more space on the street for a single-family home than if you've got more units. So that's something I would feel, I think, pretty strongly about making sure was part of the, people who get to vote on this. Maybe the idea is apartments turn over more often, but someone else is going to be in that apartment and they're going to have similar problems. I feel like I would be hesitant to do a pilot every single time. That seems like it's a lot of administrative burden, but I think that there's room for us to have thresholds or standards, or, there aren't warrants per se for requiring any neighborhood parking program, but there's nothing to say we can't come up with, you have to exceed 85% capacity on your road, or, the area. I think it's reasonable for us to say you have to have a parking problem to be able to ask for it, because I think what we don't want is it to become effectively a gated community where, you could see a neighborhood of 100 people coming together and being like, we don't want anyone else parking in our neighborhood, so we want a parking program, even though there's no parking problem, right? And so I think there needs to be a demonstrated problem and some sort of minimum number of people involved so that it can pay, somehow work out financially. I think the overall structure of what's proposed makes sense in terms of on-street parking, charging for on-street parking instead of having all the guest pass business. I think that got really complicated. And I think having a fee to get your pass makes sense. Just, you have to have a buy-in, I think. But I don't know if we need to decide on the details of what the fee is and what the details of the on-street parking charges would be, because I think that could vary in different areas. I'm not 100% convinced that the Hanover Street area, where we have the biggest parking congestion, that not having that graduated 3-hour cap would make sense. I would advocate for maybe having more incentive to have some turnover there. Maybe it's not 3 hours, maybe it's 5 hours, but I don't know if we want people camping there all day. But I could see that varying by location. And so I guess I would advocate for the structure of having a fee and having on-street parking, charging for on-street parking, but maybe those things are situational, and depending on, you know, how much does it cost to serve that area? What is the overall character of the users of the area? What do we want for turnover rates? What do we want for the fees, the parking fees?
So Mark and then Peter?
No, go ahead, Peter. I want to hear what Peter has to say.
No, I acknowledge what you're saying, and I appreciate what you're saying relative to not wanting to do a pilot, but the final portion of what you were saying really kind of reinforced why you do that, because you need to figure out what it's going to cost. You got to figure out how you're going to staff it. The challenge right now is that, you know, demonstrated problem, you know, how we need to define, there's a lot of things that need to be defined if we're going to create a program that is more consistently applied throughout the city. And the task we're given right now is this specific thing that we have studied exhaustively over the last couple of years. So I support what you're saying in terms of we need to come up with a more defined approach on how we do this. And I think that's something that, similar to the speed throughout the city, I think it would warrant some time to sit down and kind of really think about this as a subcommittee or somebody, you know, a group of people talking about it in more detail, working with Ben to really drill down into the mechanisms of, you know, do we hold up that 85% utilization, which is industry standard? Do we require 75% of, you know, what kind of household? You know, and make those recommendations, and then we adopt those recommendations and move forward. But that doesn't necessarily inform what we need to do right now on this particular situation. No, I feel the data we have on this shows what it shows in terms of utilization and benefit. The data that Ben has relative to cost is real. So in order to cover the costs, if the council wants us to be cost neutral, if they want to move forward with this program, this is what needs to be, something needs to be done. And this is, I believe, is a flexible approach on how to do it.
I just saw Mary Lou's hand up on the screen. Sorry, Mary Lou, I can't see the screen from where I'm sitting.
Mary Lou, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I thought Ben's report was simplifying this program, and this conversation is complicating it. I thought we were referring specifically to the Islington Street neighborhood, and it seems like we've expanded this conversation, and we're going around and around. So I'm wondering if we recorded Andrew's initial recommendation, if we can hop back 5 or 7 minutes and look at what Andrew has recommended that we bring forward to the City Council. I just think that we are complicating this by shooting into other neighborhoods, by talking about different fees. I don't think this program as such is sustainable financially. And at the same time, I don't think that people are going to pay $125. The people who rent in that neighborhood are renting there because it's an affordable neighborhood versus the rest of Portsmouth. So can we hop back, Andrew, to your original?
I don't think we can do that. It's recorded to the cloud, and it hasn't been. We don't have access to the recording. It's not like a DVR setup.
But I think Steve has a good.
I have a joke that
Steve,
yeah, where we originated.
Well, I just think there were 3 parts. Andrew, correct me. So, end the neighborhood pilot program in Islington.
I think
sunset it.
I mean, the council has to decide, but yeah, at
Yes.
some point
This
we
is
have to
what
end
we're
the
recommending.
pilot program because it's a
Right,
pilot
this
program.
is just our thoughts recommending to the council. Accept the framework that's been laid on the table. And then, to Peter's point, request that staff develop a methodology for a neighborhood, a contiguous, practical neighborhood to opt into the framework. Is that 3 parts?
I like Steve's.
Can we get a second?
Is that a motion?
Sure.
Okay, that's a motion. I second his motion.
All right, go ahead, Mark.
No, I just second his motion.
Oh.
It's just Leela, can you read back his motion?
We do have it on video. We can go back.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
That seemed pretty good.
Okay.
I'm trying to, go ahead.
Motion to recommend to the city council to end the pilot program. And he said accept, I'm thinking present the cost framework that Ben has laid out.
Yes.
And to develop a framework for other neighborhoods to potentially opt into a parking program.
Yeah, request that staff develop a framework. No?
If I could, Mr. Chair, I would say drop that last one and have that as a separate thing. Don't commingle them.
I accept that friendly suggestion.
A friendly amendment. That's the first friendly amendment.
Does the second agree to that friendly amendment?
Second. That's the first one. We got 10 more.
I think that motion is too long. May I? The motion is too long for me, you know. Let's refer it to the council in reference to the pilot program, period. That's how I feel.
Well, so Harold, the motion now stands would be just simply to end the pilot program and to accept the framework presented by the parking staff for
Let the council
Consideration by
decide.
the council.
Let the council decide on the pilot program.
Yeah.
Okay,
That's
so
how I feel.
So you're recommending the program? Is that what you're saying?
No.
People, yes, you're recommending.
Sorry, excuse me.
No.
You can't speak. Erica?
I think what Layla read was accept the cost framework. But to me, it's more the management framework, less the cost framework explicitly. Like the management of the program is there's a fee to get a pass and there's on-street parking fees. Maybe that's semantics.
Yeah, so I
No one
think
agrees with me on that, but it's that structure. It's not the costs themselves.
I think what we're recommending, and this is open for discussion, is that we end the pilot program.
Yeah.
and
Full
the
stop.
Islington pilot program.
Yes, we end the pilot program. And then the second part of the motion is we now have a structure for potentially a future pilot program.
Right.
Or if you implement if you eliminate the pilot and the council says it's going to be, we're going to make this a real parking program, here's the structure that you would use if you did that. We're not saying they're doing it or not.
Right. If conditionally, if they want
If
to.
they choose to move forward, this is our recommendation.
Correct. That's how I.
Okay.
Go ahead, Mark.
So, we're a recommendation body, so we're going to move forward with a recommendation. Leela, could you?
All right.
This is it.
Yeah.
A motion to recommend that the city council end the pilot program and present our parking director's recommendation for the framework of the program.
Okay, I'll support that.
If a program is, yes.
If a program is
Right.
desired.
Yeah.
Okay, yes.
Okay, that's the language of the motion and friendly motion. Now, I just wanted to state to the public that this is a recommendation of the city council, which is going to go to politicians to decide. It could end up back here at some point. Or the-
Can I chime in, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, of
Right
course.
now, if this committee took no action, the conversation we had back in, I believe, August was to extend the pilot through December 4th. So what we're saying, in bringing this motion back to council through you at an upcoming meeting, would be the PTS committee is recommending terminating the pilot now.
Or as planned on December 4th.
Sure, right. And presenting the framework, if the council so chooses, to establish a permanent program with parameters set forth here.
Correct.
So is that a friendly amendment, Leela?
I don't think it's an amendment. I think we're done.
Yeah, no, because when I present this to the council,
it's
I can
wordsmithing.
say, it's the council's decision. We could end it at that meeting,
Yeah.
or the following Monday, or December
Of course,
4th,
of course.
or heaven forbid, we could extend it for a year and refer back to parking, traffic, and safety. So, I mean, it's going to be up to the council. We just want to make sure that because we've lived this a little closer than maybe some of the council members have, but I know some council members are paying very close attention. We want to present the findings of facts so that they can make an informed decision.
Correct.
So I think what we're saying is the pilot has gone on long enough, so we're going to end it. We recommend that you end it. And two, we think Director Fletcher has come up with a good framework, if there was to be a neighborhood parking program. And then 3 is going to be up to the council to decide, what to do with that information.
Bravo.
I thought I said that an hour ago.
Yeah, but this is a lot of people have a lot of time
That'd be
invested in
different,
this, so
but-
I want to make sure we get it.
Well said.
All right. Let's move on. Jesus. I'm
Yeah.
getting awfully tired.
But we need to vote. So we have to vote on that motion.
Yeah, so could we have a roll call vote, please?
Mary Lou McElwain,
She wasn't ready.
There she is.
Mary Lou McElwain,
I think I'm voting on the recommendation that
Oh, boy.
you just indicated, and I would say yes.
Steve Pesci,
Yes.
Mark Siracusa,
Yes.
Harold Whitehouse,
Yes.
Deputy Police Chief Mike Maloney,
Yes.
Fire Chief Bill McQuillan,
Yes.
Public Works Director Peter Rice,
Yes.
City Manager Karen Connard,
Yes.
Chairman Andrew Bagley.
Yes. Okay. Thank you for everybody for all that discussion. And now we're moving on to the monthly accident report from the police department.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. We have 81 reported total crashes for the month of August. 48 of those were considered reportable and that there was excessive damage. There was 1 motor vehicle accident involving a bicycle and 1 motor vehicle accident involving a pedestrian. Looking at those 2 instances there, I didn't see anything contributory for causation factors relative to this committee of road design or anything that could be of improvement there. So we had gone almost the entire year through August without a bicycle collision with a motor vehicle, but we did have one in August, but still trending in the right direction.
Great, thank you. Do we accept those, or is that just informational?
Informational.
Okay. And then on to miscellaneous. Mark?
Got an email from a resident that reads, when an event is held at the Bridge Street lot, that's where they have metered parking, et cetera, does the city receive rent? So if there's a special interest group or an event there, does the event organizers pay rent? How much revenue is lost when that lot is, does the event holder pay for municipal services such as trash and police? Thanks. I give that to Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry.
I would say that it varies. Events in the city, for instance, not a lot of people know, but the Halloween parade is actually paid for primarily by a nonprofit. It's not a city-run event. The city does a lot of work to make sure it happens, but it's funded to a great extent by a nonprofit. Conversely, the holiday parade is, I believe, a city-funded event. So I would say the same thing happens on the Bridge Street lot. Sometimes the city might get revenue or consideration, but many times the city will not, because it's a council policy decision that we want to encourage events like this, so we don't charge a fee or we charge a token fee, or I don't think there's a hard and fast answer to that question.
Yeah, it's just a public, I'm just reading that from an email and just sharing it with the group. So.
Is there any other miscellaneous?
Mr. Chairman, I received a letter this week. It was after the packets went out, so we didn't make it to the agenda, but there's a request from a resident of Broad Street to take a look at the intersection of South and Broad as far as parking close to the intersection, creating conflicts getting in and out of Broad Street from South Street. So that will be on the agenda for next month.
Okay. All right. I guess with that, we'll move to adjourn.
Move we adjourn.
All right.
Second. Okay. Is that
I
all
guess,
right?
do we need to vote on that, or I think we can just be adjourned?
I think administratively you can adjourn.
All right, so the meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Mary Lou.